Let's go! Come on, everybody, and let's get to bumping, cause it's trailblazer time. Baby, Rip City's jumping now.
Okay, Brindle up the middle. Hit!
Come on, everybody.
All right, everybody, welcome to the 212th edition of the Holy Backboard Podcast. I am Dustin here in Rip City, and I got my man
Sage chilling here in Beaverton, Oregon, and we have a very special guest who's been telling us all of these crazy stories.
I mean, we have one of the OG, deep in the game, Blazer collectors, Steve Davies. Thank you for joining us. You might know him by his moniker on Twitter, @Blazer Collector. When you take that moniker and that handle, you better have some grails, and Steve does. Steve, thank you so much for joining us on this afternoon. Right off the bat, what got you into the Blazers? How did you become a fan? We all have our fan stories. What got you into the Blazers before collecting? And then how did becoming a fan really spark your drive to just collect so much rare and incredible pieces of team history?
Well, guys, happy to be here, Dustin, Sage. Thank you very much. I was 10 years old when the Blazers started in 1970. I lived over in Hazeldale. We had, the typical 70s, late 60s, 70s neighborhood. There were about 15 of us kids. We ran around. We played every sport by the season. Being in, the Portland area, though, we didn't have a major league sport of any type. We had the Portland Beavers, and, that was it. So when the Blazers came along, this was a big deal to us kids. And I tended towards basketball early. My dad had played. So we'd go over to the games, and, you could walk up to the ticket office night of the game, buy a ticket, sit down low, and there were only a couple thousand people there. And that just sparked my interest. And just being a kid, I had started collecting sports cards same year. Whatever they had down at the little corner convenience store, I bought 10 cents a pack, brought home. So the Blazers came along. It was another avenue. I was kind of at the time writing letters. I somehow got a hold of addresses for all the sports teams, every sport. I was writing letters to all of them. And they were sending back things, pocket schedules, pictures, tickets, even autographs. The Blazers sent back little Windows cling sticker. That did it. It was the Blazers anyway, but that sticker was the first collectible in the collection. It's behind me here on the shelf. Picked up a little magnet at Fred Meyer, same year. Little team logo magnet. Those two things started the whole thing. And from that point on, it was just whatever you could find in the stores. And there wasn't a lot of items available. You'd walk in and sure, you'd find a sticker. If you went to the right bank, you could get a pocket schedule, but nobody thought to keep those. You didn't go into a Foot Locker or you didn't go on NBA.com in 1971 and order up your jersey and shorts and what you're wearing to the game. Me being that kid, 10 years old, it was just the right age, followed them all the way through. By the time we got to 76, I'm a cognizant 16-year-old kid. I'm watching college basketball, 70, 73, they get Bill. My God, I can picture where I was when the coin flipped. And so we knew we had something good, or at least a lot of us, some of us did, even in 76. But you didn't have a lot of collectibles. The Blazers hadn't been a real successful team up to that point. Once the championship happened, it exploded. You just, whatever you wanted, you just printed it up and you stamped NBA champions on it and you threw it in the stores and it sold. And that's the wall you see behind me here. That's all related to first year or championship or the oh so close years of 1992. That kind of really got me going. I had all the sports cards up to that point. You had one option, tops. I had some game programs. I had a couple of little black and white 8x10s I'd gotten through the team. You could order those for $1 a piece. But once the championship hit, I mean, if you were here, you know what Blazer Mania is. I mean, there was 250,000 people on the streets of Portland when they won, when they had the parade. You went into any store, you picked it up, you had it. From that point, that's where you see a lot of collections start. The earlier items were around, but nobody thought to collect them, not even the team. But when the internet hit, that changed the ballgame. I found out that, I didn't have to rely on what was here in the stores. I started scouting out collectible shops literally around the country, online auctions, and all. I started finding jerseys. I mean, game worn jerseys. To me, that was, a shock. So I thought, well, these would be cool to have. So the first one I bought, Enos Watley, number 8. I paid like $100, 1988 jersey. And that got me rolling. And then I found another and another. And pretty soon I found the company that used to come into Portland, and they would buy everything. There were companies out there that would literally buy everything. So they'd meet up with the team. They'd write them a check, $30,000. Here's 40 bags of jerseys, shorts, warm-ups. They had a ton. They liked me for a long time because I would literally just buy dozens of jerseys at once.
And for a while, weren't the early jerseys a brand called like Sand Knit?
Yes. They were actually made by Willamette Athletic over on Sandy. And there was a lady who did all the stitching from year one. I mean, she stitched the names on them. They made them right here in Portland. I used to go over there once I got my driver's license. Every Saturday, I drove over from, at the time, Brush Prairie Battleground. I'd drive to Sandy, to Willamette Athletic, and I'd go through their racks. Maybe there's a blank, maybe. Nope, never. Never was. Those jerseys are near impossible to find. Anything prior to 77, 78. They're just, anything is gold because nobody thought to keep them. So they ended up with players, they ended up with family. In some cases, they don't even exist any longer because you had a player on the team that got traded off in November or waived, and here comes the next guy in, and he grabs same number, and the name came off the old jersey. Name went on the new jersey. That guy's jersey's gone. You'll never find it. So the game has changed a lot. Now, with the game worns, of course, the players have so many options, and they're given so many a year. Prior to the 80s, 90s, these guys got basically 2 road, 2 home jerseys a year. That's it. Make them last. Thank you. Oh, and we're going to use them next year.
I mean, absolutely. You look at the protocols now. If a player gets blood on their jersey, that's got to come off or it's got to be cleaned. We've seen LeBron rip off the sleeves of his jersey before. You have to have multiple jerseys, and we've seen like Dennis Rodman. We've seen other players just throw them in the stands after they're done winning a big game. So you can't. That just doesn't make any sense anymore. That's why they're so rare. The further back you get, the quantity wasn't there.
No, the quantity wasn't there. And again, like I say, nobody thought to keep them. And the teams especially, and I know a lot of people that work for the teams that look at them now and they're like, oh, you're kidding. No, but to them, it's part of the job. And that's the way you kind of have to step back, because people say, well, why didn't they keep it? Well, why would they? To them, it was a part of the job. It's the same as a towel. I mean, if you work at an insurance agency and Rick Adelman came in and he signed a car insurance, and did you save the pen? No, it's part of your job. I still have a pen Bill Walton signed his first autograph with, but I'm a whole different story.
You're just a different dude when it comes to collecting, Steve.
Well, I don't know why it is, but once I started finding things, I had to keep it quiet. And that was the hardest part of this whole thing, is for 20 years, literally, I'm buying all this stuff up and nobody knows it. Because had they found out, the prices would have gone up.
Smart.
And I couldn't afford that. Once I started picking up in bulk these jerseys, that's when I kind of got the idea that, I'd like to have a really cool collection. And to me, really cool would be to have one autographed item and one game-worn item for every player in the team's history. And this is in 90, so that, all right, the game-worn I know is a pipe dream right out of the chute, because some of those just don't exist anymore. But if I keep that as a goal, I'm going to grab everything I can grab. To this point, the game-worns are gone now. Once I amassed them, I had over 300 game-worn jerseys. The significant ones went back to the team. The ones the team didn't want went to collectors that I knew weren't, the people that were going to sell them off to Upper Deck so they can get cut up and put on a sports card. These are going to collections, are going to stay. And then the rest I just sold. If people wanted jerseys, I had them. And I let them go way too cheap. But it's not about the money, as long as I can recover what I put in. God willing.
Speaking of jerseys, what is your favorite design the team has worn from 70 to current?
I have two, actually. The first year. And the first year is unique in that they, of course, didn't have the sash, the colored sash. That didn't come in until after the championship. But the script blazers is at an angle. So it starts lower on the right side and angles up on the left. Second year and beyond, they leveled it out. So I have that first year, which also did not have names on the backs of the jerseys. They didn't do that until the second year. And then the second design is everybody else's who was there, was the championship year. It's a 2-year design they brought in 75. It has the vertical blazers, just so simple. And it was gone after the championship. You literally have 2 shots at it. I've only ever had one. It was Lloyd Neal's from the championship game. That went back to the team. I did have Bill's shorts from that year. Those went back to the team. And I had Maurice Lucas's shorts from that year. Those went back to his family.
And so when you describe items and obviously making a fair transaction back to the team, what goes into your thought process? Because clearly these are really incredible items to have that any fan would want. Are you torn a little bit, or are you more of a collector where you think an item has a specific home and this was what you thought was best for the item?
That, honestly, in a nutshell, that's it. The underlying goal, once I started really amassing things, and I got in with some contacts with the team, that I was able to pick up mass items at a time. They'd clean out the offices, and John White would call me up. He'd say, Steve, What are you doing? Come on over. And I'd come home with boxes and boxes of unused game programs. So over the years, I've given those away. But the significant items, once I started finding some of those that I just knew were literally one of a kind, the idea shifted. I mean, it had always been there that someday maybe the team would want this stuff back. You know, Portland is deeply rooted in their Blazer history.
Mhm.
I've had to convince a few of the management of that. But maybe, just maybe someday they'll want to do something. And I want to be the guy they come to. I want to be the Fred Meyer of Blazer Collectibles. I am your one-stop shopping, guys.
Absolutely. And that brings me to my next question. You see some organizations, mostly the NFL, they have their own team museums. And as a Blazer fan, I want to be able to go to a place and see all of these items, whether it's a starting lineup, it's a rare poster, it's a jersey, everything. And the Blazers just don't have that. Is that something that you would want to not necessarily take on, but just be a part of? Like, I think there's a spot in the Rose Quarter for a museum. Like, I want to go and visit.
What internal documents have you seen? No, that really was a goal of mine, that I could have a museum. I think I have enough to do that. I know a couple other collectors who have things that obviously I don't. And, you know, we've talked about, yeah, that would be cool. But the reality of it is, the overhead kills you. You know, the team doesn't have the room. And honestly, back in 2013, 14, when they were doing the remodel at the Moda Center, I worked with them for 7 months, back and forth. And we started with that idea. What do you have? And let's start there. And can we do a museum? What it came down to was space and budgets. It's a fabulous idea to have, but the payoff, it's so hard to fund a museum type setting. You've got the overhead of the building, you've got the upkeep, you want to be purchasing new items, and Portland's still a small town. You know, don't get me wrong, my family's been here forever and a day. But in the grand scheme of sports, it's a small town, and you have to look at the reality of how many and for how long will people pay $10 per person to come and walk through and look at the stuff. Because once you've seen it, you've seen it. And sure, you can do special displays and events like player signings, but that all takes overhead now. And you'd have to have a solid couple to $5 million to do it. I don't have that. And it's not in the team's
Let's get Dame
budget.
on the horn. Let's get CJ.
Damien, CJ, you know, honestly, I could never, people have asked me that, but I couldn't do that. I don't ask for anything. I mean, would I love to see a consortium of players come up and say, you know what, dude, you're right. Let's do it. Damien, I used to be in the car business. I know about the dealership. I can help you out. But the reality is purely economic. The base just isn't there in a museum setting. So the team went a different route. And what they did when they did the remodel, they designated one of the luxury suites. They called it the Legacy Suite. And we went through and, I mean, literally hand selected the items that went in there. Game-worn jerseys, items that were significant to the team. So that's where you can go, albeit it is one of the suites, but you can go there and see the team history. And the jerseys they had framed very nicely, are up on the wall. They have a display case. some of the things that we had on display were the 1977 Oregon Senate resolution honoring the Trailblazer Championship. We had a letter from the NBA and the actual 50-cent piece that Commissioner Kennedy flipped in 1972 when Portland got LaRue Martin. Just all those one-of-a-kind things. And that's what they did. That's better than I could have hoped for, not what I would have loved to have seen. I mean, ultimately, sure, I'd love to see something the size of the Moda Center.
Yeah, I was even going back to when it was the Rose Garden, and even when it opened, and they have some of these items, but they had a display on the lower concourse where you could go up and you could see a couple items. They had TVs playing highlights, and you can put your hand on the ball and see your hand size compared to like Sabonis or Drexler, and they still have that upstairs. But I'm still walking through there, and I'm like, you could just have displays here. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be like your price of admission could be your ticket to the Blazer game. Like, there's, I guess, as someone who just appreciates memorabilia and everything, I want more of that.
I'm in the same book as you, and unfortunately, and I don't know how to put this politically correctly, but again, we go back to the people who work there. They are employees. That's their job. So this is not directed just at the Blazers, because I've worked in front offices of sports teams before. They lack imagination. They see it from a business standpoint. They can be super fans, and they are, but they have a disconnect with how to relate to the person who's coming to the games and spending that money and loves to see this stuff. When I started working with the Blazers in 2013 on the remodel and the idea of bringing some of these things home, I literally had arguments with one of the vice presidents who just did not see the value of the team history and honestly didn't think people cared. And
I mean, I've been there. I've been there, Steve. I worked for 5 years, and if you can't put a sponsorship corporate logo on something, it's next in line. So I definitely feel you.
And I'm not picking on Portland. Portland management is great. They really are. I mean, and
it's a sports industry issue.
It's an industry. It's a business, and they have that disconnect now that honestly would be so easy to make the crossover. I've offered my services. I don't have that college degree. So what can I know about events and collectibles?
And you're starting to see vintage shops pop up in Portland. You have Laundry PDX, the shop that you worked with over in Southeast. What was Ball?
Ball was life.
Ball was life. Exactly.
Yeah.
I think there is a desire for this, not whether it's culture, apparel, memorabilia, nostalgia it's never going to go away. And Portland has the most history back in 77 and in the early 90s. Like, that's where we were at our peak. We want to get back there, but people have fond memories. You have younger fans who still go back, and they weren't alive for Rasheed Wallace, but they love what he is for the culture, what Bill Walton did, Maurice Lucas. Like, even for me, I wasn't alive during the 77 championship, but as I've gotten older,
you didn't have to say that.
YouTube is now there. I can go watch the games. I can feel a part of that Blazer Mania era. I can pick up pieces from that era, wear the t-shirts. Even though I wasn't there, I still feel connected. And I think there's such a great opportunity to educate and show all of the team history, because it's so fun looking back at eras and seeing how they were different but similar at the same time.
It's fun to do and to compare the collectibles and where things have gone as well. And things tend to run, and I've done collectibles literally for 50 years, and not just sports, but I deal in antiques and in history items. Things run on a 30-year cycle. They always have, and they always will. And the reason for that is you start really being cognizant of what's around you and what's going on. About the age I was when Portland came in, 10. Think before that, you don't have a lot of specific memories, but after that, well, now you've got 10 to 18. And that really forms, if you're a sports fan, I mean, think about that. That's it. Those are your teams. The guys who won the championship when you were 12 locked you in. So 30 years from now, how old are you? You just hit 40 to 50. And your kids just left home, and you're in prime spot in your job, and that money is fluid. You got a little extra, and you know what you're going to go buy. I'll tell you what you're going to go buy. You're going to go pick up what you had when you were 10 to 18, those prime years of your life. And that's why it runs on that 30-year cycle. So what we're seeing right now is a resurgence of the Kersey, Drexler, Williams, Duckworth, Porter. You're starting to see more of that because it's 30 years down the road.
That's such a great insight. And I want to talk about two pieces that are behind you about teams that locked me in when I was growing up. It was the early 90s Blazers that got me to my passion with the Blazers. I didn't know those Wheaties boxes ever existed. Can you take a moment to discuss what they are, how you tracked them down, and what significance they mean to you?
Well, tracking those down were easy. I found a collector who had both. And the story really behind that is that anytime a team gets now to the finals, I mean, again, it's a business, and that's not knocking the league. That's, they got to pay these guys. So they have to have things ready to go. You hit the finals, trust me, there's a design out there that says Miami Heat 2020 NBA champions, because they're ready to lock those. They're in the stores the 2 days after. The hats are in the stores. There's another you can see behind me as well. They're just a little black dot above that book. That's the hat patch from 1990 that says 1990 NBA champions. So that's the hat patch design that you would have run into G.I. Joes and bought. So whether these are legit only copies doesn't matter to me. I can tell you the 92, the one on the lower of the two, there's lots of copies of that floating around. This is a copy. So somebody did that. The 90, on the other hand, I've only seen a couple, and that one is signed by all six that are on the box itself.
And then rest in peace, 3 of those team members are gone, and so you look at that, and it just adds significance to how rare that memorabilia you have.
It's one of those things that if you don't have it now, you never will. So, and time does that to us with everything. So you look at some of the championship items, and we've lost Herm Gilliam and Robin Jones, and now those things, especially Robin, because he had a stroke several years ago. So his signature changed significantly. A lot of items out there because we've done reunions, with his signature after a stroke, very few before. So, those are the little nuances that you watch for. And I've just had to, over time, Drazen Petrovic is another. I have 2 of his rookie cards that are both signed. I could get hundreds of dollars for each. They're not for sale. They're not.
So, Steve, you've been around since day one, 1970. If you could put 4 players or people that have influenced the Trailblazers organization, who is your Mount Rushmore?
Oh my gosh. That's who threw that question in? I'm
No,
not.
that was just when I knew that Sage was working on getting you on the show. These are just questions that are coming.
That's a good question. Nobody's ever asked that. Everybody asks who's your favorite, and da, da, da. But if you look at the four that shaped the franchise, you have Bill Walton, first and foremost. And, argue all day long, but there's still only one player who was the centerpiece of a championship in Portland. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Drexler obviously is there.
No arguments with the first two.
Jeff Petrie is there. And if you weren't around in 1970, Petrie was a stud. He was co-rookie of the year. Nobody saw that coming. But he and Dave Callens, Petrie was good for 20, 25, 30 a night, and 50 when he got lit. Oh, number 4, I'm going to go with Lucas. Because without Lucas, you don't have that championship either. He defined the fight that Portland has had ever since then. You're not going to screw with us. I loved Luke. And his family now I stay in contact with. They're just fabulous people. And that was what he brought, not just to that team, but you think about it. You don't mess with Portland. And he's the guy who brought that with Dawkins.
Mm-hmm.
He just looked at Daryl and said, not on my watch, kid.
And then he completely threw a mental mind game at him, going up to him in game 3 and oh yeah, we're cool. And it just threw him off. Threw the whole Philly team off. Yep.
Oh, Dawkins, he was ready to come out and mix it up until Luke did that. And Luke was the nicest, gentlest guy you would ever want to meet. He was such a different person off the court than he was on the court. And you just, that's my 4.
Damian Lillard in his 8th season still has hopefully a lot left in the tank, knock on wood. Is he someone that you could see eventually being on your Mount Rushmore?
Oh, absolutely. I only picked players right now who are not active.
That was a very wily veteran move on your part, answering that question.
When this is all said and done, Damian Lillard will go down as the greatest trailblazer in the history of the team. There's no argument with that. He's already there.
Yeah.
He's just still playing. He's adding to it. Who knows what he'll do?
Exactly. And I think Sage and I have discussed this a bit because clearly he doesn't have the MVP or the championship. He doesn't have the longevity of Drexler quite yet. But when you factor in how dynamic he is on the court and how loyal and vocal he is about his support of Portland. Okay, we're small time in Portland. We don't have superstars that stay here and support us like we support them and come out and really reciprocate the love. That plays a huge role in how you are viewed during your playing days and after your playing days. I mean, you take a look at a guy like Brian Grant. He played 3 seasons here, but he is absolutely beloved for how hard he played and the kind words that he has to say after the fact. So that just goes a long way, and nobody, I think, does it better than Dame.
Yeah. Well, and, guys, they gave you my handle on Twitter. Blazer Collector, beat me up. Championship is having that ring is not an indicator of whether or not you belong in the hall or you're the greatest. There are dozens of fabulous players that never got a ring.
Mm-hmm.
In this day and age, with the free agency and the player movement, it's cheapened it. I mean, you don't have those teams that came together like the Blazers did in 73, 74. We brought Walton in, we tied him with Wicks and Petrie, and we had the chemistry wasn't, and it took 4 years to get there. And it took jettisoning Jeff Petrie and Sidney Wicks to do it, the 2 biggest stars the Blazers had. And they got Lucas back. Fair trade.
All day.
But you don't have that anymore. Now everybody gets to the end of the season and we're looking at free agency and who's available and who fits now with this guy. And look at here, we got a big 3. Let's rock, kids.
It's a different way of roster construction now than it was back in the day.
Yeah, and I'm not saying it's wrong.
It's
Yes, I am.
It's just the nature of the game.
Mhm.
Yeah, and you know, so you can go get a ring, and then you've got the other guys who are 10th, 11th, 12th on the bench, and as important as they are, they're locking in the same reason. Where can I win a ring? So you can't count that as a main factor anymore. And I don't know that you ever could. You know, a championship is a championship. And at the end of the day, there are only 12 to 15 players in the league all year long that come home with that.
Mhm.
That's it.
30 teams.
And that's it.
It
You know,
takes
the rest
a
of you
lot
guys are
luck.
losers. Come on.
Steve,
Now-
one thing. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say,
Okay.
I just don't think that's a fair indicator. You look at the entire career and, you know, Damien, we'll pick on Damien because that's a darn good example. You know, he came in here, he literally, who's he? You know, and he came in and he said, I'm going to do this. You know, just watch. And you see him grow and you see how he, just took over when LaMarcus was here. And it's grown from there, and how even the veterans look now to him. I mean, he owns this town,
Absolutely.
you know, and he will. That's just going to be that when it's all said and done, you know, he will. He'll have a legacy in this town that's going to be real hard to beat.
Steve, one thing that I have picked up doing quite a bit of research, you know, whether pre-pandemic, going to Powell's and picking up any old Blazer book that I can, you know, I've read Us Against the World, The Long Hot Winter, and you see these, you know, the internet wasn't back then in the early 90s, and a lot of things don't get reported unless you start to read and to see. What are some wild trade rumors what's one of the wildest ones that you have heard or can remember that you have seen written down that didn't come true, but looking back, you're like, if that happened, you know, dynasty. Like we can all talk about Sabonis coming over, and that is something that we all know. But like, I guess what I'm talking about is like Barkley had 3 teams in '92 that he was like, I want to go to. It's Portland, it's Los Angeles, or it's Phoenix, and they were close. You know, I've heard Kevin Duckworth in one of my books say like, I think I'm getting traded for Hakeem Olajuwon. This was in '91. Like those type of things just like blow my mind. And then I start going down these rabbit holes of what could have been, or just the different possibilities.
Well, you're going to think I'm crazy. I don't pay a lot of attention to trade rumors. That's all they are. And maybe it's just the way that I made up, but I tend to look back at those things rather than watch at the time. And so many of them never, ever pan out that they just don't hit my radar. You know, okay, yeah, guess what? There was this one story on NBAtravels.org, you know, that talked about, you know, Jordan was coming to Portland and it was for Paxson and what? One little outlet, you know, and it never crosses the radar. So I don't have any in mind. I tell you all kinds of stuff about, you know, draft picks that people think were wrong, Jordan. But, you know, that I don't even look at trades. I just don't even watch them.
Man, that I wish I had that philosophy, but holy shit, I see.
Well,
I see. Oh my God, I love this guy.
I'll be honest with you. Every once in a while, I pop on the trade machine online just to have some fun. You would not even want to see my trades, although with an exception, and everybody except Lillard on the roster, we can get LeBron. But you know, I mean, honestly, anybody can do that, and it's fun to look at, but it's not something for me as a fan that catches my interest. I like to go back and look at, you know, things like, okay, the 72 draft. Why didn't we get Bob McAdoo? You know,
Yeah, you're talking about the draft, and it kind of tied into where I was going with my question, because I have a book about the draft. And there was just like tidbits, like Portland was really into picking John Stockton. Like, we had more than one first round draft pick, and, Utah kind of snuck in and took him later in the first. We ended up getting Kersey in the 84 draft as well. So it wasn't just a bust with Bowie. There were just so many different tidbits that I love to research and hear about. And it's like, I had no idea that because Stu Inman, just a genius.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Built that 90 and 92 team with small college superstars and just wonderful trades. So,
and that's one thing that you miss now, I think. And I'm just not sure that this works to the player's advantage anymore. But, you go back to 1970, you had a 20-round draft. Your 20th round pick was a 6'2" forward from North Elizabeth State. So now you have 2 rounds. I'd almost like to see more, but I get the idea, which means that they really, really need to nurture something along the lines of a G League and a minor league. There's just too much talent out there. So that I think is where we may very well see the next trend is into G League.
Well, you look at Miami. I mean, Kendrick Nunn, Duncan Robinson were both G League stars. And, if Miami can do it with scouting, why can't the Blazers do it with scouting the G League? I mean, they tried with Jalen Adams.
Well, and there's no reason that you can't stock a roster. It's going to cost you money.
Mm-hmm.
That, and again, business, and I get that. There's just so much money to go around. That's just a whole different, So I think that's going to be our next transgression, I'm going to call it, because they'll get it wrong the first time.
The G League now has a roster full of okay ranked players that are, playing, games where they've played a fast pace potentially and put up stats, and maybe that is the future instead of going to the.
Well, I think it is, and just the fact that you haven't seen a lot of those players yet progress on to the NBA. There's a few, every year, but, again, how many players are in the league compared to how many move? And look at minor league baseball, hockey, little different setup. Again, you build that continuity, but that's one thing I think that may in the long run hurt a lot of sports teams is you don't have that continuity that you had. People follow players now, not necessarily teams. Yesterday's Cavaliers fan is today's Lakers fan. Deal with it. And they're going to be tomorrow's whoever's fan. So you tend to lose that continuity with the organization itself. So I get why spend the money on it.
Steve, outside of Game 6 of 1977, what would you say is one of your favorite moments as a fan?
Oh, man. Can anybody really pick one? I mean, especially in 50 years, you've got Brandon Roy's shot. You've got Lillard's shots. I can remember the only radio broadcast I specifically remember when I was 11 or 12 years old was literally laying in bed listening to Shanley playing the Bucks. Very few seconds left, and the Blazers were down and timeout, and they're going to inbound. And I'm laying in bed, and my heart's ready to fall out of my chest. And I don't know if they won, lost, whatever, but I just remember that feeling of laying there. I could never pick one. There's just been so many over the years. Maybe that's the historian in me. And
there absolutely has been. And your point about not remembering whether they won or lost, but still that feeling brings me to one of my favorite memories, and it didn't work out, but when we won the lottery in 07, I remember where I was with my wife and my friend, and we just went into a frenzy. Like the thought of how this could impact our future for a decade plus, and it was almost just like we did it. I mean, we hadn't won anything. We hadn't even selected a player, but like disregarding for the fact that it didn't work out, I will still hold that memory near and dear just because if I can remember the elation that when we saw it happen and unfolding right before our eyes.
Yep. I remember that feeling when the coin flip, whole different scenario, but Bill Walton. I knew then that was key.
Who was number 2 in that draft? Dustin. Seriously? I would have thought you knew.
I don't even know. That's rude. Oh.
Well, Dustin's my Blazers encyclopedia. So
fair, I'm more of I like 90, and
because I used to know all this stuff, and then I got old. Marvin Barnes.
He's a badass, but he wouldn't have won us a chip, especially with how he acted in the ABA.
Yeah, well, and he was teammates with Lucas, so how much of that rubbed off in St. Louis?
Yeah, well, didn't Luke say it's either him or me, and then they traded Luke?
Luke came over. Let's see, I have to go back and look now. See, I used to know every little detail, and then I realized that I ran out of room, and I had to start purging. So the internet's helped me with that because there's been certain things. It's like I don't need to remember that anymore. I can just look it up. Yeah, I mean, those drafts back then, it was so different than now. And I listen to and I see so much of the talk and the arguments about the drafts. And that you have to look into the what's and the whys. People will not believe me, but as I'm going through boxes here, I have an article from 1983 that I saved. That article is talking about about the draft and who each team should pick and why it would be the worst scenario ever if Michael Jordan was left for Portland. I have it. It's in a box. And I remembered that when all of this talk, Portland sure screwed that up. And I thought, wait a minute. That's not what I remember from 1983. Jordan is obviously, we know how it worked out, and they knew that he would be good. But if you go back and you look at the pre-draft assessments, most of them say something along the lines of he has the potential to be an all-star and have a lengthy career. And that's as far as they went.
Yeah, it wasn't really until I believe the draft happened, and then it was USA basketball practices, and that's when he really took off, and everyone was like, "Oh,
yeah." He broke his ankle first year, so you didn't see much, or second year, but
second year.
He didn't come on until after that, and Bowie still was the right choice at the time for Portland. You've got to go back. They had Drexler a year. They knew he was going to be good. Everybody knew Drexler was going to be good after his rookie year and just watching what he could do even then. And there are articles that address that what would Portland do with Drexler, who's obviously now we know going to be a star, and a Jordan who plays the same position, who's likely to be an all-star. That's not what they need.
Yeah, it definitely switched the philosophy to just take the best player available. And
yeah. And even then, I'm not sure that Jordan would have, at the time topped it. And that's what people who can look back, they didn't see those articles in the paper. And good luck finding them now.
Didn't Portland lose a coin flip to draft Hakeem?
They did.
Yeah, I mean that changes things too, because they definitely
that changed everything. Back in the day, they did the coin flips, and it was on Sunday afternoon between Jack Nicklaus and Arnold Palmer on the ninth tee, and you'd have the commissioner and the two team presidents, and they'd literally flip a 50-cent piece, and one of the teams would call it heads. Oh, it's tails. Boston, you have the first pick. I mean, that's how it was done. Like I said, I had the actual 50-cent piece that the commissioner flipped in 72 when Portland got LaRue Martin over Bob McAdoo. And again, much controversy, but go back and look. And there's a reason they didn't pick McAdoo. Most and foremost, his agent told Portland, if you draft him, we're going to the ABA.
That's what happens when there's that secondary, that
exactly
the NBA.
Exactly.
You had that opportunity and leverage.
Yeah. So, Portland basically cut their losses. LaRue is a good guy, just wrong place.
So we've talked about the 77 Blazers, obviously the only championship team in franchise history. But aside from them, you have 90, 91, 92, 2000. Each of those teams had legit chances at bringing another Larry O'Brien trophy to the Rose City. In your opinion, which of those teams do you think was either the best or probably had the best chance at winning it? So you can maybe say, I think 92 was best, but we had a better chance at 90. What of those four teams do you think really had the best shot at bringing home another championship?
2000. They didn't even make the finals, but that team would have just rocked. They were loaded. 90 was a surprise. It kind of came out of nowhere. You hit Detroit, who was in their prime. There was nobody going to beat Chicago during their run. So 2000 had the best shot at it.
Yeah, I watch a lot of old Blazer games on YouTube, especially during the pandemic. Kind of takes my mind away from things, and I love watching my favorite teams play because I don't really have those games on VHS or anything. So you look and you start to read, and when we stole Game 2 in Detroit hadn't won in Portland in over a decade. Like, we were so dominant at home. So, 90 was such a golden opportunity. You look at 91, they win 63 games. And obviously we knew what happened in Game 1, fourth quarter, and obviously in Game 6. But 2000, I mean, that was the when I was most cognizant. And I was, high school, talking to my dad during the fourth quarter. Can we somehow get finals tickets? Like, that just... And they were like, Indiana beat us 2-0 in the regular season. But again, regular season, like everyone said, Portland, Los Angeles, this is the finals. Yep. And they were loaded. Bonzi Wells, Jermaine O'Neal on the bench, just stacked. I mean, just one of the best defensive teams, I think, in franchise history. Just so smart and well constructed. I mean, it's a shame that Bonzi and Rasheed have their own podcast. Pippen has said in previous interviews, why didn't they just keep it together? Like, they wanted to run it back. Like, they didn't feel like that loss in Game 7 was the straw that broke their back. Like, they wanted to, let's go again. Like, we want a rematch. That's kind of what's almost more upsetting than losing that fourth quarter, was like, we didn't get to see what could have happened.
And how do you know if you've been a fan all that time, and this is just no disrespect to anybody in particular, but that whole Jail Blazers thing killed that team, and not on the court, but the community. And that is the other side of the small town. Portland loves the Blazers, but they reached that line. And I think, a lot of the players recognize that. It's not that it was done with any malice or any hate. It's not like we hate, these players. There's only one that we question, and that's Raymond Felton, and we all know why. So I'm kidding. That sped it up. It really accelerated that disassembly, because when they didn't win, that was the only thing that the community would have taken over them being on the front page of the Oregonian every third day. You know, it just got to that point, and people said, we're not anymore. This isn't who we are.
What team provided you the most joy in watching out of all of the teams that have played?
It's championship. It's not even close, because if you go back and you watch those games and you watch the whole games, that's basketball. I don't play it. It's just, for lack of, or, not to group everything together, but motion offenses. They are not one, all right, so we've got, LeBron's isolated, everybody. You look at Bobby Gross, that championship year. He never stopped.
Mm-hmm. Kept moving.
One side to the other, and, setting the screens, and, that entire, just the team. And for years and years and years, so many people would point back to that 76-77 Portland team and say, that right there, watch it, because that is the best team basketball you'll ever see play. And that's what they were. They were just a unit that everybody knew everybody's strengths and limitations, and they played to it. No, Portland wouldn't have won the finals had Bobby Gross not just worn Julius Erving to a nub.
I mean, that Sixers team had some talent too.
Again, yeah, Lucas McGinnis, my God.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me two tougher guys in the league right now that you'd want to see go head to head. There were just little things. It was all the little extras, and you can't ever, of course, Lucas's, stand up and fight, and then the gesture right down to, you say, Bobby Gross, just doing nothing more than running circles on the floor. It was just a fantastic team to watch. These guys now are fun. I wonder now how much this will affect the game that we'll see in the future. And the reason I say that is I was in the gym a while back, and there was a team having practice. So I was standing there watching, talking to the coach, and these were 11, 12-year-old kids. I watched the entire practice. There was not one shot taken inside the three-point line. Not one. For the entire practice. The ball went up. If it was rebounded, it was immediately thrown back out. And I just kind of looked at the coach and I said, really? She said, well, yeah. This is what the kids play now. I grew up in a different time where, center made a difference, and, center's used for nothing more than spacing now.
Well, all it takes is one team to break the mold, and we saw that with Golden State. They were a jump shooting team, and Barkley for every year said jump shooting teams can't win a championship. Well, they blew that theory completely out of whack, and now everyone's trying to replicate it. But what they don't understand is not everyone has a Draymond Green that is a defensive player of the year, that is a facilitator, a decision maker, an entirely intelligent big that can make that work. You can't play small ball without a Draymond. So I think sports goes in cycles. Right now we're seeing a three-point wave. It's all going to come back, and it's all going to go back to the three-point. Like it's a cycle. And I think,
don't get me wrong. I mean, if Damian's going to come over and launch a 38-footer and hit it, well, I wouldn't tell him no. I mean,
And, to Dame's credit, he really had to add that to his arsenal, because New Orleans was such a tough defense where they were trapping him even a foot outside the 3-point line. Now he's like, I've got to go quicker. We saw in the bubble, Brooklyn was doubling him in the backcourt. So he has to shoot from that distance. I mean, if you don't get talent around your superstar and you're saying, okay, put the team on your back, he's like, okay, these shots are a little more difficult, but this is what I have to do.
Oh, what he can do for somebody. I played for a long time. That's a long way out there. You're watching it on TV and you see these guys shooting threes. I challenge you to go down to Moda, stand behind that line and see how close you get, because I've done it. And then you put the added, well, guess what? We got him trapped now. Now there's 2 guys on him. Now what are you going to do? And that's talent. Now, I'm not saying I won't watch it, because I do, and I yell, and that is a talent. But that's what we're going to see more of, because that's what the kids are learning. I grew up in the dunk era. I mean, just plain and simple. I grew up in the dunk era with Dr. J and Dominique. Oh, jeez, we had fun.
Absolutely. And what I do appreciate about this current generation is there's no more of, if you can't be an offensive threat, you're not on the floor. Like players, even big players coming in, can you shoot? Can you dribble? Can you pass? So I do think in a way it is making players more well-rounded. Like you're seeing, I mean, if you would have told me that Brooke Lopez was going to be that much of a marksman when he came into the league from Stanford, I mean, he was a beast on the block. He had great post moves. He is just shooting it with effortless ease from a long way away. So like you are seeing, I think the NBA has never had more talent, and it's just incredible how well these players are their skills it is. So we're going to get to a point where the NBA is going to say we either need to extend the line or we need to extend the court, because you have let's be honest, Giannis is not going to be the only Giannis. We're going to see more and more quote unquote Greek freaks come through the system, and that's why they're professionals. They are the cream of the absolute crop, and we kind of get to sit back and watch. So.
Well, and that's true. The evolution of the athlete themselves, obviously, when you go back to the 70s, and Chicago Bulls, your center was Tom Boerwinkle. He didn't quite strike the fear into everybody, because they knew that he'd get down the court every other play. Now you look at these guys that are 7'2", leading a break. Like, this game's changed, but all sports have changed.
Yep.
The static sports, you don't notice it as much. And by static, I mean baseball. You look at a player back in the day like Hank Aaron, Willie Mays, Mickey Mantle, compare him to what they are now. There's not leaps and bounds of difference between these guys like there is in the motion sports.
Basket catches over his head. Like he was still. They're still doing it now. It's like
that game, still holds up now, 60 years later, because you don't have that motion. The motion and the agility is what changes everything.
Yeah, it's much easier to compare eras in baseball than in basketball or football.
Yeah, if you look at basketball, and you go back to your big shooters back then in 1954, and everybody's laughing because this guy's standing at the free throw line extended with one arm, and there's nobody near him. It's like, So, this game, I can't even imagine where it will be even 10 years from now.
I think the youth coaches need to just you have to treat everybody like they're a point guard. Because everybody needs to have these skills.
Oh, absolutely. Everybody should have that chance. And that's what youth sports should be about. For my playing, and I wasn't anything special, I couldn't even make my high school team, but that's a whole different story. I made college team. And I always point back to the one coach. I could jump. There was the one thing I could do. So I always ended up playing forward. And I was 5'10". Even in college, I played forward at 5'10", but I could jump. But we had a practice game. And our coach at the time, in his very, very first year of coaching, he was a graduate assistant, was Mike Tebow, who's now the coach of the Washington Mystics and the most winningest coach in WNBA history. Little Mike, back then, during this practice game, looked at me and he said, I want you to try something different. Play point guard or play shooting guard. I went off for 66 points in this practice game. And it changed my entire outlook on the game. I never went back and really played forward. And it was all because Mike, and like I say, I played a little semi-pro leagues until I was in my 30s and blew my knee out a second time. But Mike was the guy who did that. It was, it's a practice game. Go for it. Just have fun.
Basketball's supposed to be fun.
Yeah. And that was in college, college freshman up at St. Martin's. And we were just Mike will tell you, we were a horrible team. I don't think we won an inter-squad scrimmage, but we had fun. It was the first year of a JV team at the college. Our center was 6'2". That's why I was a forward at 5'10". We got annihilated every night, but we had fun and we learned. So, that's what the youth, honestly, that's what I'd love to see, is the opportunity to try these different things.
All right.
They get locked in, man.
We have some really good fan questions from someone we both follow, PDX Graffin, another member of the Memorabilia community. He has 4 questions, so I'll read them off. We'll go one by one. First off, what is the most rare item in your collection?
I have a couple. The most rare at this point, well, I'll pick this right now just because something popped up the other day, but I have a desk clock that's engraved on the top, Harry Glickman, Portland Trail Blazers, first season, 1970-71. Thought, well, this is cool. This was Harry's desk clock. About 2 weeks ago, a friend of mine sent me a message. And he says, hey, and he and I are mutual friends of Bill Schonley. And he said, what can you tell me about this? And he sent me pictures of a clock that said, Bill Schonley, Portland Trail Blazers, first season. I said, what I can tell you now is we know there's more than one. So that would be one very rare item that's here. You know about the one that we just sent back. That was the rarest. I have Lenny Wilkins' 1-page coaching contract extension here that's signed by Lenny and Harry that would have extended him through the year after the championship. So that's a rare item. I have a billboard, a little, like a salesman sample billboard from the first year. It's on the desk, kind of in the corner behind me. That's, it just, Blazer one over there. I have a copy of the championship ring that was given to me by the Lucas family. I know why he wants to know. It just goes on and on and on. But, the pendant, obviously, we know about, and that was the rarest.
Quickly, for our listeners who may have not known the story, can you quickly discuss this pendant that you've been referencing?
Sure. About 11 years ago, as I was collecting, I was always watching for Trailblazer items, and somebody offered up a championship pendant. Players, when they win the championship, players get rings, and of course that's always celebrated and people know that. What they don't know is that a lot of the teams will also do things for the wives of the players. Of course, executives are not just male in the offices, nor our coaching staffs or training staffs either. In 77, Portland had a pendant made up for the wives and some of the office staff. They were made at Carl Grieve. They were about the size of a quarter and had the same info as the ring. Portland Trailblazers, 1977 NBA World Champions, nice enameled logo with a diamond right in the center. So I negotiated with this guy for a month, finally reached a price. We went and picked it up in the parking lot at Clackamas Town Center because I'm telling you, you never know where these things are coming from. But this one was special, and there was a name engraved on the back. So I was going to a Trailblazer function the next day. So I took it with me, and I sat down with Harry Glickman, and I said, I just picked this up. We looked at the name on the back. It said Betty. And I had known from my research that there had been a Betty in the ticket office. And I thought that I'd remembered that Herm Gilliam's wife was named Betty, but I could never really find any confirmation. And Harry, bless his heart, he couldn't remember off the top of his head either. So I went through, tried to get a hold of Carl Grieve. We were trying to get the original paperwork out of the warehouse when they went out of business. And I just sat it back up on the shelf with everything else. And it's been just a cornerstone of the championship piece of the collection ever since. And I will post it from time to time just so people can see it on social media, be it Twitter or Facebook. So here a few weeks ago, it popped up on my Facebook feed, and I'm not on Facebook much anymore, people. So if you find me there, go ahead and send a friend request, but I'm not there much. And I thought, well, that'd be cool to share. It was a Friday night. So I shared it on Twitter. And one of the things that we do on my Twitter page, we, of course, sell memorabilia to people who are looking for it, but I like to give things away if I have a lot of them or just for fun. So I asked people, to guess what player they thought it was associated with without giving the name out. And we'd do a giveaway of some type. So I'm sitting there just watching my feed. People are commenting, Dave Twardzik, Larry Steele, Maurice Lucas, Corky Calhoun. I'm like, nope, closer. And this one comment just pops up and it says, that's a great piece of Blazer history. And I looked at the person that posted it, and its last name was Gilliam. And I thought, what are the chances? So I real quickly messaged him. And I just said, hey, thanks. Can I ask you a question? He said, sure. I said, are you related to Herm? And he says, yeah, Herm was my dad. Herm was my pops. And so I said, okay, this is going to seem strange. Can I ask you a personal question? Of course. And I said, what's your mother's name? And I sat there, I'm looking at my phone and I'm looking at Kim, and I said, this is it. Sure enough, that little bling, and I looked down, Betty. And I said, young man, this is your mom's pendant. And we got to talking, and we talked all night and just reminisced. He was born the championship year. So he remembers as a youngster seeing it, something like it in the house. But, no specific recollection of it. But he had mentioned to me that, geez, I'd seen you post it a few times, and I always, thought, God, that looks like mom's. So I said, well, do me a favor. So next morning, I was sitting here and I get a message from Rick. And he says, yeah, I talked to my mom. Says, she hasn't seen hers. It was lost or stolen in a move like 1984-ish. And that just started the ball going. I said, my God, this is your mom's pendant. I said, I'm sending it home. I want to give it back to your mom. And so we got together on it, got all addresses. We made kind of a big production of it going out the door. It was fun to do. If you want to see it, it's on the Twitter feed. And the end result was here the other night, Rick texted me a picture of his mom, the biggest, most beautiful smile on her face. You see what it does to me now. I mean, that was it. That was just it. I for a collector, so deeply invested with a team, and not just a team, but that team, to be that guy that said, here, because I know this is special to you. I mean, it just the emotions, and I mean, now we're good friends. Now I talk to his son, and we're sending pictures back and forth, and I kind of feel like, in some respects, I'm becoming these players' kids' crazy uncle. I talk to Rick, I talk to Maurice Lucas's son. It just, wow, 60 now, and to think back to when I was 10, and all I ever wanted to do was, see a Trailblazer jersey with my name on it. And to look 50 years down the road with the franchise and see how that's come around, and now to be able to take these things, I've given back things to the team, to the players, to the families. That, to me, is what it's all about.
When you talk about the 30-year cycle, and you've got children of the championship team now wanting to bring back memories from their family, whether they're still alive or if they've passed, and you're kind of there to bridge that gap and say, I have some of these things, or I can help you point you in the right direction. So it's a really neat feeling to be able to kind of, like I said, bridge that gap and be able to help track down things. Like, things weren't mass produced like they are now. So
no. And in the case of the pendant, that was so personal. There's absolutely no way I could keep it ever. That's Betty's pendant. And like I told her, I've just been the caretaker for 11 years. I kept it safe until I found you. And we've looked. I mean, that's the way I approached it, because items like that, I said I had the shorts that Luke wore championship year, and his son knew that. I had a jersey that the team had given him. Those went back to the family. Those aren't mine. To the friendships now, the ability to share with people is fabulous. To have something like that happen is the icing on the cake, especially for me.
what is the hardest you've had to work to track down a signature?
Oh, I'm still working on some. There's about a dozen that I don't have. Some of these guys were here and gone so fast. The hardest one that I'm having to find right now, Carmelo Anthony. Are you listening? Only because, thank you, Mom and Dad, I'm cheap. And I can go online, which is now what I usually do. I don't bother the players or the team for anything. I never have, and I never will, because I don't want to be that guy. I'm not that guy that when they see me, they go running. I've known that guy. So I'm very specific in how I do my autographs. I prefer autograph trading cards. They store easily. So I have kind of a 3-tiered process. Ideally, I will get that player pictured as a Portland Trailblazer. If that's not possible, I will get that player pictured in a college uniform. Last but not least, I will take an opposing team's uniform, but I'm not ever happy and I won't ever stop looking. So for that reason, I'm kind of limited on Carmelo items right now. I have to get his rookie year Syracuse, which runs about $120, and I'm not there. So that's more for me what makes it tough. They're out there, and my original quest, I was collecting everybody, and I literally mean draft picks, training camp invitees, summer league. Now those were tough, because if you have never tried to track down an autograph of the 17th round draft pick in 1970, you've never lived. So, those were the hardest ones. And I do have some like that just came out of nowhere. Somebody thought to have them sign something. Those, now I've scaled back. I can't do that anymore. There's just way too many out there with summer league, and so now I only collect the regular season, but we have all but about a dozen of those. So I'm closing in.
What is your holy grail item that you would never get rid of in your collection?
If I had it, or the one thing I have now that I wouldn't get rid of?
Both.
Oh, the one thing if I had, I'm the same as a lot of people, would be the jersey that Bill Walton threw into the stands after the championship game. That's the pinnacle of collecting. I knew for a long time where that was, and I've lost track of it. What I have that I would not get rid of is along the same lines. First and foremost is the jersey behind me with my name and number. It's the one thing I wanted when I was 10. It took me 40 years to get it. Nobody else wants it. But to me, that piece it just verified everything that I had done at that point, because that was given to me by Larry Miller on the Rose Garden floor at a charity event. And they surprised me. And these are the things when I talk about the little detail things that, you just don't see teams do. But the management at the time found out when they had done a feature on the collection on Blazer Cable that you can see on YouTube in 2009. Well, they mentioned in that, a quest for my own jersey. Well, the team took that and ran. So we had the charity event. They had me bring up all the game worn items. They put them on display. First time I'd ever seen that. I was overwhelmed. And they came and got me and said, we need you to come back here, with us and sign some papers for insurance purposes. Oh, sure. I mean, I've got, we're taking pictures of me. Come on, get a picture. This is as close I'm going to get to a Blazer contract. And they've got pictures of me signing it, and this bag hit the desk in front of me or the table in front of me, and I looked up and Larry Miller was there. And he just looked at me with that big grin, and he says, we heard the story. We know why you've done this. And he just pulls this jersey out of the bag, and he says, we want to give you this. Welcome to the family. I was 50 years old. I damn near broke down in tears. So to have that now, and it just, like I said, it just really verified everything I had done, that yes, indeed, I set out on this little quest with a sticker that just evolved to all the cards I could buy, that evolved to, oh, look what's over here on the internet, that evolved to maybe someday the team, to this. Here we are. And so ever since then, when the team has special events, things like that, they'll often get a hold of me, ask if I have items. The 50th anniversary press conference that they held beginning of last season. The 5 jerseys they had to represent the eras all came from me. So, and they own them all now. They're in the team's hands, which was really most important to me. To bring all this home over all the years, I prefer that it stay home or with good, hard fans. Yes, I've let things go to people who I knew were going to resell it, but those weren't prime items either. So, yeah, the jersey for me wouldn't go. There's other items, as I'm scaling down, you see the poster behind me. That's from 1970, the first year. Just extremely, extremely rare. That was finally taken out of its original plastic tube last week and framed. So there's always things like that.
His last question: who's your least favorite team? Who is the rival for you?
Oh, Lakers.
Absolutely.
No, there's no. Yeah, no. If you're a Blazer fan, you cannot like the Lakers. You can't. It's a rule. That it's like number 3 in the handbook. And it goes all the way back to the days of Wilt Chamberlain and Jerry West. And no.
I think that's what makes the 77 run so sweet, is it went through Los Angeles. It was a clean sweep.
I got to tell you that I was a cheeky 17-year-old kid when that happened. And our family vacation that year was down in Los Angeles. We were taking my younger brother. He wanted to go to Disneyland. So I'm a 17-year-old kid. My Blazers just won the championship, and we're loading the car up to go to LA. Yeah, I took every Trailblazer t-shirt I had.
Good man.
We get to Disneyland, and we're staying at the hotel there in Anaheim, right across from Disneyland. And right next door is the Anaheim Convention Center. And on the big reader board, it says, tonight, Orange County Stars Volleyball featuring Wilt Chamberlain. And I said, this I got to see. So that night, come around, I start walking across the parking lot, going up the ticket office, and I hear this, hey, wrong shirt. And I froze and I spun around, and there's 7 feet of Wilt Chamberlain grinning at me.
Holy moly.
He was getting out of his car. I was just stunned. He's laughing. Scared me to death. He's laughing about it. It's my one real close out of the Blazer realm claim to fame. I was so stunned I didn't even have him sign anything. But that night I did buy an Orange County Stars volleyball shirt, and I wore it for years.
That's awesome.
They were my team, but man, scared me to death.
Wilt is not one you want to mess with, for sure. I actually have a question.
Okay.
If you are a Blazer fan that doesn't have any collectibles, what would you suggest they start with?
Start with what you like. It's the basic rule of collecting. Start with what you like. And it doesn't matter what it is, because there's enough things out there. So if you like trading cards, do trading cards. Too many people get into it now, and they're trying to think, all right, what's going to be worth money 10 years from now? Don't do that, because I've done this for 50 years, and you're going to end up disappointed. Collect what you like. If the bottom falls out of the market, and it will, you've got stuff you still like looking at. That's it. They're the collectibles. They're out there everywhere. But first rule and only rule, collect what you like.
I think that's a perfect way to end off.
Nobody does this wrong. Trust me.
I echo Sage's comment. That's a great way. That's a great mantra that I live by. I've got a ton of stuff that probably maybe not worth a whole lot here. So
And my other mantra is, if I have one, I probably have six. So feel free to buy it from me and fuel my retirement. Thank you very much.
Steve, one final thing before we wrap things up. You did a major sale right before Memorial Day, which sparked my interest in getting rid of some of my things that I didn't have room for. And you also sparked my interest in donating the proceeds to a local cat shelter. So thank you for that as well. Can the fans expect another one of these? Maybe a pre-holiday sale. Like when? Like I know there's Blazer fans out there kind of salivating to be able to get some of this material.
Well, I'm glad you asked that. Actually, the sale that we did that you mentioned, yes, we did a poster sale, and we sold, hundreds of posters going back to the early years, generated a donation to Salem Friends of Felines here in town of $850. I can't thank everybody enough for that. We are going to be doing an autograph sale. I'm working on it literally as we speak. I took a break from cataloging items to do this today. I'm 80% done. So depending on when this airs.
Tomorrow.
Beautiful. Yeah, tomorrow. Because I plan on starting this Monday, and it's something that will go on. I'll have autographs. I can't tell you how many yet. Autographed cards, photos, index cards, tickets, programs, all kinds of things that will be selling again to benefit charity. So the best I can say is get on Blazer Collector on Twitter. Hit that follow. I generally will follow you back unless I miss you, and it does happen, but eventually I'll catch up with you. We have a ton of fun. Like I say, these items now, I've done my job for Blazer family. I collected them. I got what needed to be got back to the team, to the families, to the players. I'm precariously perching on the line between hoarder and collector now. So it's time to find things, new homes.
And when that becomes live, we'll post it on the Holy Backboard Twitter as well.
Well, just so everybody knows, if this is airing Monday, I'm planning on starting with some items that I have several of each, so there's no big rush on the first items, but we're going to hit Saturday and most likely have an auction of the one-of-a-kind items or just one-off items. So that's what to look forward to.
I can't wait. And Blazer fans, to make sure you see when those drop, again, follow Blazer Collector on Twitter. I actually have you on post notifications. So when those items were coming, I just loved going back and reminiscing, like, I remember that, or this is incredible. Again, totally worth your time. It is an awesome follow. Awesome that you're doing this for charity as well. Steve, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Dustin, Sage, this has been a kick. I enjoy talking to you guys online, as I do everybody. I'm not going to run from you. I've got a few questions to answer already, I see, about collectibles, which is cool. You know, just from the post earlier, I'll do my best to help you out because that's what we all need to do, is just work together. You know, nobody's better collector than the other guy. I'm the same as you guys. I just ended up with a ton of it.
All right. That is the Holy Backboard. We will be back very soon to talk about the week of the 16th through the 20th. It's trade season, free agency, and the draft all in 1 week. So you're going to be hearing a lot from us. And last thing, draft Desmond Bain.
Wherever you may be, this is Bill Shinley. Good night, everybody. everybody.
Let's go!